Okay, so I'm going against Jane, I don't know how to say anything. But in his, the claim I'm responding to is gonna be recycling is harming the environment. And my opponent's secondary claims are the spread of contamination, air pollution is still a problem, and only a few plastics can be recycled. My response to the claim is gonna be recycling is beneficial for the environment, so I'm gonna start off with the definition of recycling. Recycling is making the new products from material that have already previously been served to use. So in my opponent's first claim, he says that Health Physics Society found in 1965 and specialized in radiation safety. So there's something flawed with this. It's a little outdated information. It's from 1956, and there has been new laws that have been implanted, like in the US, that have taught us how to better recycle things. On a national level, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, also known as the EPA, oversees a variety of waste issues. These include regulations of hazardous waste, landfill regulations, and setting recycling goals. More specific, recycling legislation is localized throughout city or state governments. So like in Maryland, Delaware, Seattle, they all have different things and policies for the recycling, like how to get rid of batteries and plastics. And then his second thing, he was going to discover that, he goes and says that 1,000 apartments have been identified in Taiwan with evaluated levels of gamma radiation. Now, in the rest of his speech, he goes off using statistics with the US, so this doesn't really apply to our regulations, because like I said, we have regulations here. And I found information that the people of Taiwan have progressed in recycling, and they minimized their waste since 1997. And now they've been able to keep it down to 51%. And I also found in 2008, Taiwan recycled more than 50% of its batteries, thus suppressing their goal of achieving a battery recycling rate. And this was according to the Taiwan government recycling.org. And then he goes on to say, and then my other claim why it's beneficial, it protects our health in several ways. It's common in third world countries to find litter because, like I said, their policies aren't the same, so they don't have the factories or the machinery to dispose of things properly like the way we do here in the United States. So that's why it makes it harder for plastic bags on the floor to decompose. And then the recycling process can minimize the cutting of trees and forests, and by doing that, it could help improve air prevention and floods and help produce raw materials. So my opponent's secondary claim is air pollution is still a problem, and I am arguing that recycling helps in mitigating global warming and reducing air pollution. He goes on to talk about how the process from transferring recyclables to the actual recyclable factory is damaging our air pollution, but we do have diesel fuel where it has been controlled, and that's like the least of our problems. The ARB, also known as the California Air Resource Board, have significant steps to clean up diesel pollution from sources such as buses, garbage trucks, and nearly 80% of the world's energy comes from oil, coal, or gas. So that's kind of the least of our problems. Like the transporting part, it's more of like the production of what we're making is what's the bigger problem with our air pollution. And then recycling conserves energy. So he says that it takes up a lot of energy, but actually making more products is what's taking most of the energy and releasing those greenhouse gases. And that's according to the California Air Resources Board. And we are actually saving energy. Recycling offers significant energy savings over manufacturing with virgin materials. Manufacturing, and this is an example, with recycling aluminum can use 95% less energy, and that's according to the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. And then my third claim in response to his only a few plastics can be recycled. Plastic is not the only thing that can be recycled. My opponent failed to leave out that glass could be recycled, metal, aluminum, steel, and 1 ton of recycled newsprint saves 600 kilowatts energy and 1.7 barrels of oil. 1 ton of recycled glass saves 42 kilowatts of energy and 0.2 barrels of oil, and that's according to the EPA. So we're actually saving energy when we recycle and make new products. And then recycling minimizes waste production in landfills. So by recycling, it's actually preventing less landfills, and we don't want landfills everywhere because that's going to make it hard for us to move to places, and you don't want to live in places where it's dirty. And also the overflowing of landfills could damage our ocean and our earth later on and when it starts overflowing. And then it also reduces water pollution. So making goods from recycled materials generates far less water pollution than manufacturing from virgin materials. And this is why I think some of recycling is beneficial rather than it being harmful to the environment. Some aspects of it could be harmful, but there's more positive than there are negatives. So,
Okay, structurally everything is pretty good. At the beginning, I thought that you basically presented a straightforward counterclaim. I don't know why you had to define recycling. I thought that was a little bit of a waste. When you dove right into the argument about the 1956 example and experience, I think the audience probably needs a little bit more context to know what's being talked about. But that was one of the few places where you directly talked about the evidence that the advocate used and their experience and the problems with their reasoning. I thought you had a very direct response to it, talking about how the United States has different rules and how even in Taiwan, which is the example that he uses, they have changed and altered their rules to some degree. I'm not exactly sure how the battery recycling thing applies to the advocate's argument on this situation, but it sounds like you have at least demonstrated that there are efforts to recycle there, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of information that suggests that it's damaging to do the recycling in those places, which is what the advocate's argument was on the first point. On the second point on air pollution, I thought you did a very good job diminishing the significance of the advocate's argument, suggesting that diesel represents a very small portion of the pollution problem, and also arguing that the EPA has already addressed issues like this, and arguing that recycling reduces the use of other energy resources, which in the long run means there's going to be less air pollution. I never heard an unbalanced piece of evidence from you or the advocate on this particular issue, so I think you both have reasonable arguments to make on this. If I had to assess it, I would say the idea that recycling substantially reduces the amount of energy that you're having to use is a pretty strong argument. And since you've already addressed some of the diesel issues, that feels a little bit like you are on better terms on that particular point. On the plastics argument, I think you acknowledge that there are a whole bunch of other things that could be recycled. I don't know that this directly argues the issue that the advocate presented. But you did present a good explanation about what the advantages of recycling are, and so I think that that's a good general response to that point. There's not really a lot of discussion of the advocate's evidence except on that first point. All right, thank you.